hour OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel. Bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We got Bryan Hayes in here, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star, Andrew Raycroft later in the hour. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. Jays Dodgers tonight. I just saw someone tweet out, Eric Bolin tweet out, who's a baseball reporter, that he talked to a talent evaluator who watched Aaron Judge earlier today at the club's minor league complex in Tampa. Said Judge hit a long home run to right center in one of his at-bats and appeared to be moving around well. I did not see him favoring the toe. I would be encouraged, end quote. And we always talk about the deadline and bringing in players from other teams, but there have been occasions over the course of sports history and trade deadline histories where sometimes the best acquisition you can get is a player who's injured returning to your lineup.
Oh, yeah.
And that'll certainly be the case with Aaron Judge and the Yankees.
Oh, because they can't hit without him.
Yeah.
I mean, they've just been brutal without him. And it's hard to imagine that no matter how good he is and how much over this toe problem he is, that he can actually resurrect that team just with how bad they've been since he went down in early June with that thing. But, man, it's you're right, though. He's in terms of adding a superstar, you can't get better. Outside of trading for Ohtani, there's no better guy to walk through the door than Aaron Judge.
No, that's the truth. And, Mike Trout, I don't know when he returns for the Angels, if they're still in the hunt, if Ohtani's still his teammate, but that would, apply there. I'm seeing online as well. I guess the GM of the Astros are saying it's looking promising at this point that Altuve and Alvarez are going to return to the lineup tomorrow for the Astros. There's a team in the wild card hunt. They're currently sitting in the second wild card, and they've had injury problems. Obviously, we know they're the World Series champs. If they get hot, they get cooking. Like, they could still make some noise.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a really quiet year for Houston, and yet they're still 57-44.
Oh, yeah. Let's not underestimate that team.
No. Like, they very well could win that division. They're 2 games back.
Oh, yeah.
They're right behind Texas.
Yeah, Texas was hot out of the gate, but they've come back to earth a little bit. And, yeah, Houston's the real deal. Like, dude, do not sleep on Houston.
No, do not sleep on Houston. Jays Dodgers tonight, coming off a big one in extras last night. Still have not seen the lineup for tonight. We assume Bichette returns, Bassett on the mound against Urias, and Urias has struggled this year. Like, statistically, his numbers have not been strong.
No, but
he is the stud. But Bassett's been really good. Really, really good. So the Jays probably feel pretty good about that situation going into the game tonight, game 2 of that series. So yeah, we got Trey Wingo coming up here in just a moment, and we're getting close with the NFL camps opening league wide, and this because Bill Belichick is in midseason form.
Oh yeah,
right. He's ready to go because Lawrence Guy, who's a defensive end down in New England, he had skipped mini camps. And it was like a minor camp holdout situation, or potentially going to blow over into, the beginning of camp and possibly be a distraction. Obviously a big story if you're covering the Patriots.
For sure.
Right? Like, they're going to have to win based on their defense. That's what they're likely going to have. That offense is going to be stagnant. I don't know if Mac Jones can carry them anywhere. They don't have a ton of talent offensively.
No.
So, you get someone that you think is going to play a pretty prominent role for you. Obviously, people are curious what's going on here. And Bill Belichick stepped up to the podium earlier today, and he was asked about the situation. And here's what Bill had to say about it.
Do you believe the situation we're taken out of the spring has been resolved?
No, I hope so. We'll see. It's football season. Most players play football in football season. See how it goes.
Like, just such a big personality. It's football season. Most football players play football in football season.
It's interesting, man.
Put that on a plaque.
Like, the legacy is secure for Belichick. He is the greatest coach in the history of the sport. Nobody's denying that, but you're hearing the murmurs that 71 years old, Patriots aren't very good. Like, is there something in Robert Kraft that eventually sidles up to his old pal Bill and says, "Hey, pal, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time."
I wonder how ugly it would have to get.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't been like gross, like embarrassing since Brady left.
No.
Right? I believe they made a playoff appearance. They haven't been great. They're nowhere close to Super Bowl contenders. and that's not going to change. And they're in a monster of a division now.
Right.
With Rodgers there, we know what the Jets are going to be. We know what the Bills have been. And Miami was a playoff team, and Miami's a good team. Like, they're a really good team. So I think it would be shocking if they didn't finish fourth in their division, which would lead most to believe, myself included, I think it would be shocking if they were a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
But they win 7 games. That's not horrendous.
No.
It is based on the standards he set for the better part of 20
Well, that's
years.
the thing.
But, it's not like they're what the Bears were last year or the Jaguars were the year before. I don't think the anticipation in New England is that they might win 2 or 3 games and have a run at the first overall pick.
No, it never is.
No, and nor should it.
But if they won
they have
7,
enough there.
No, but if they won 7, Hayes, that would be 3 of the last 4 years where they've been sub 500, and had 3 of the last 4 years where they haven't made the playoffs because they did lose a wild card game a couple years ago. But and then 71-year-old coach who is clearly got issues at
He's
times.
got a reputation, and he runs the ship a certain way.
Yes.
He's a very stubborn. I think it's more likely, and I don't know. I don't think this. I'm not even sure you can accomplish this if you're Robert Kraft and the Pats. But you got to take his hands off the wheels of player personnel decisions. You can coach.
That's not happening though.
No,
he's still in the building, right?
I'm not sure how you can pull that off. Here's Trey Wingo of Pro Football Network. Trey, what is your anticipation of what the New England Patriots' upcoming season is going to look like, and the pressure that's on Belichick in New England?
Guys, great to be with you, and it's interesting what you just said, and we can comment on that in a little bit. But here's my situation on the Patriots. If Bill Belichick doesn't have a good year, I think this might be his last year in New England. Well, I mean, look at what happened. Look at what's happened, and you touch on since Tom Brady left. Missed playoffs, boat raced in a wild card game, missed playoffs. Those are what they are. And Bill Belichick is going to go down in history as one of the greatest coaches in the history of the NFL. He's going to eventually surpass Don Shula for the most wins in NFL history. But at this point, I really wonder if he's going to do it as the head coach of the New England Patriots.
Wow. So you can picture a scenario where if he's out in New England, there's another team that would just hand the keys to him because, Belichick's not coming in just to coach and listen to the GM. He's running your whole operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and who wouldn't want that? And to your point about, you got to give what you just talked about, got to take away control as general manager. Look, Bill is really good at one thing and not really good at another thing. What Bill is really, and I mean really good at, is comparing apples to apples. And when I say that, I mean he sees a guy in the NFL that is not doing well for a team. And he says, I can make that guy work for our team. Guys like Deion Lewis, for example, a guy that couldn't hang on in Cleveland, okay? And then he becomes a star or a really good role player for the New England Patriots. And he's done that his entire career. Bill's biggest obstacle is apples to oranges, which is collegiate players and how they're going to fare in the NFL, specifically at wide receiver. If you look at the wide receivers that he's drafted over the years, it's been extremely hit or miss. And, the most recent one was the first-round pick out of Arizona State, N'Keal Harry, which did not hit at all. So Bill is better than anybody, in my opinion, at going apples to apples. Apples to oranges is where he struggles a little bit.
Well, he's also in a division, or the Patriots are in a division that have, the eyes on.
They're the fourth best team in that division.
Right, exactly.
Let's be honest about it.
Yeah, that's exactly. It would be a shock if they weren't.
Yeah, that's not a hot take. That's not
No.
God, what did he say? I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Jets, and they have a really good defense. Now, I can see a million reasons why it won't work because they're the Jets, but you have to walk into the scenario thinking that it's going to work.
Right.
Josh Allen is still one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. And if Tua can stay on the field, and that's a huge if, which I understand, there's not a more dynamic offense in football than Tua with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And that leaves Mac Jones and the Patriots 4-4. And I'm not sure since Belichick took over that there's been a scenario in which we believed going into the season that the Patriots were 4-4 in their own division.
Yeah, I know it's hard to fathom, isn't it, Trey? It certainly is. I wanted to get your take on a team that probably thinks it can be the best team in that division. The team that's going to be featured on Hard Knocks, where Aaron Rodgers has arrived and is wowing people with incredible training camp throws. Where are you on this? Like, this has the potential to be a huge flop because these are the Jets after all, but also
Correct.
could be a great fairy tale story in New York. Which way do you think it's going to go?
There's no way it shouldn't work, but that's why it concerns me.
Exactly.
I mean, the history of this organization, they tried this with Brett Favre a few years ago, well, like a decade ago. But, this is not an organization that has built success at all. The last time they won a Super Bowl was Super Bowl III. We're about to play Super Bowl 58. Mm-hmm. Everything says it should work, but this is by far, in my opinion anyway, the toughest division of football right now. And my question becomes, and I want to be clear about how I say this. The people in Green Bay they're good reporters, like they're friends of mine, Jason Wilde, Rob Domofsky. They do a great job. But the way they approach their job is very different from, say, how folks in New York approach their job. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember those 5 or 6 years ago when the Packers got off to a rough start and Aaron Rodgers said that famous quote, "Hey, everybody RELAX.
Right.
We're going to be fine." That will not fly in New York, okay? If he says that, New York headlines will be, Aaron Rodgers is delusional. It doesn't work that way. And I'm really curious who Aaron, who is, by the way, a very, very persnickety person, like Mark Murphy, the Packers president, said it years ago very well. Aaron's a complicated fella, okay? He's divorced his family for reasons that the family has no idea why they're divorced. And if it starts bad, it could get bad pretty quickly. Now, hopefully it doesn't start bad and they go on this great roll and this great roll. But if it's a slow start, I'm a little concerned about how things are going to work in New York.
With Trey Wingo, speaking of New York, the Giants, they end up signing a deal with Saquon Barkley. It was going to be a franchise tag situation. Everyone's buzzing about the running back position in the NFL. I mean, you got collusion within the NFL because running backs are on group chats, and they're all buzzing about this and trying to figure out how they can find a way to make more money. With considering where the game is at now, the rules, the quarterbacking being as elite as it is, can you picture a scenario where the running back position returns to prominence? And if so, what would that look like, and how does it happen? No. Just a clear-cut no.
No way in hell. The safest record in the history of the NFL is Emmitt Smith's all-time rushing record. That is never going to be touched. You can put that in granite. You can put that in like plutonium and encase it. No one will ever come close for a variety of reasons. And, I do appreciate, I guess, on some level, some of these guys out there, the carnival barkers, that are like, well, we got to do this. We got to create this fund for players, running backs to get paid. Well, who's going to pay that? Those are the owners and the general managers of 32 teams. They have made it very clear what they believe the value of the running back position is. And, oh, by the way, you got a group chat that everyone's on the Zoom for all the running backs. Saquon Barkley signing this deal absolutely torpedoed whatever that was. Right? He took a little extra money for 1 year for $11 million and basically told the group chat and the Zoom to go F themselves. That's what happened. I mean, that's what happened. Yep. If they were really concerned about the position, and if he was really concerned about the position, you know what he would have said? No, I'm not taking that. I'm standing with my brothers. I'm doing this all. This is for Nick Chubb, and this is for everybody else. He said, oh, a little extra money? I'll take it. And quite frankly, he should, because it's never changing. It's not going back the days of Jim Brown and Walter Payton and Emmitt Smith, those are in the dustbin of history. It's never going back. What you're seeing now is a team like the Chiefs, who used a first-round pick on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in 2020, and in this current streak of their domination of the NFL, 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons and 2 wins, their 3 best running backs have been an undrafted free agent in Damian Williams, a 3rd-round pick in Jerick McKinnon that they pick up every year for pennies on the dollar because nobody else wants to sign him, and a 7th-round pick in Isaiah Pacheco. That's just the way it is. It's not changing. And I do appreciate all these people trying to pretend like they had this solution. But at the end of the day, you got to convince 32 owners and 32 general managers that it's worth it. And quite frankly, with all due respect to Saquon Barkley, whom I love as a player, and I hope he gets as much money as he possibly can, he's been in the league 4 years. He's been hurt 2 out of the 4 years.
Yeah.
If he wasn't hurt, we'd be having a very different discussion.
Yeah, what would you say to a kid who's a high school phenom running back, Trey?
Change position.
I was going to say, is that as simple as that? Like, I know you're good at this, son, but you got to look elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, look at all the former players, right? Where are their kids playing? Whether it's Joey Porter Jr. or J.C. Horn, that's Joe Horn's kid, or all of these other players, Antoine Winfield Jr., where are they all playing? They're playing cornerback. What happened today? Trayvon Diggs got almost $100 million contract.
Yeah.
I mean, the money, there's 5 positions that are paid in the NFL right now. Quarterback, obviously. Wide receiver, obviously. A tackle that protects the quarterback. An edge rusher that sacks the quarterback. And a game-changing cornerback. Mm-hmm. Those are the 5 positions that are going to get paid. Everyone else is on a sliding scale of we love you, but. And that's the way the running back position is. And everybody's going to have these glory day images of, what it was back in the day. That was back in the day. And Saquon Barkley accepting this 1-year, $11 million deal tells you everything you need to know about the running back position.
With Trey Wingo, was reading a couple of stories about 2 quarterbacks that I think are incredibly intriguing, their story, regardless of how they got here, in terms of how they're going to perform this year. One of which is Brock Purdy, who I guess has been cleared. Sounds like he's going to be good to go and should be ready to rock for the Niners. And the other one is Deshaun Watson, who's trying to convince people the only thing he cares about is now football. As a guy who's followed this game and covered it and talked about it extensively, basically your whole life, Trey, which story is more intriguing in 2023 for you, Deshaun Watson or Brock Purdy?
That's a great question. I am not as intrigued as Brock Purdy because I just don't believe in a 7-game sample, right? Like, he had a great 7 games with literally everything you would want to make a quarterback good. An incredible offensive line, a good running game, weapons at wide receiver, and a suffocating defense. Like, I don't care if you're Mr. Irrelevant or whatever. If you have all those things, you'd better not suck as a quarterback, right? Like, literally, you've been given everything you need to succeed. What I'm concerned about, or more interested in, is what happens with Deshaun Watson. Arguably, he's in the best situation of his life right now with the team he has in Cleveland. And this is the season where we will see either that ridiculous contract justified by the Cleveland Browns or vilified by the Cleveland Browns. Because all the rust from being almost 2 years away from the game has been put away. And a lot of it's self-inflicted. Let's be clear. He deserved that.
Yep.
But he has all the weapons around him. They have a good defense. They have, unfortunately, a good running back in Nick Chubb, who's not going to get the money he dearly wants. They have wide receivers. They have a good offensive line. They have a good defense. Whatever Deshaun Watson is going to be, we're going to see it this year. And if it's not a top 5, he'll never be a top 5 again.
Always great catching up with you, Trey. Late July, it's almost go time. We'll do it closer to the season. Thank you for this.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Always a pleasure.
Trey Wingo of Pro Football Network. Yeah, Deshaun Watson, for a guy that was a story that was, almost away from the game because of the nature of it, and him, basically being told by Houston, all right, you can't come around, and him wanting out anyway, right? Like he demanded the trade before everything came out. Then it felt like it was an impossibility they could trade him. Then they do trade him. He gets the biggest guaranteed contract in NFL history, then gets suspended.
Incredible.
And yet, to me, it's naturally, and I understand why, we're talking about the running backs. We're talking about Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
What's he up to with the Jets? Hey, Dan Campbell's doing some wild stuff in camp. He's doing push-ups out there. What a wild and wacky guy. And there's Deshaun Watson, who has been in the spotlight for the worst possible reasons for 2 years, is kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah, for sure.
And
you're right, because he was the biggest story in the league for most of that season. Where he was
if he returns to form, like if he is what he was 3 years ago, the Browns have the best quarterback they've had in 30 years.
Yeah,
they have a legitimate top 7, top 8 quarterback in the league. That's what he was. Like when he was rocking in Houston, he was. Yes, Mahomes was ahead of him, but not by much.
No,
right? Josh Allen hadn't made it yet. And, that's another guy in the AFC. Naturally, it's Mahomes, it's Burrow, it's Allen, it's Herbert, it's Rodgers, it's Lawrence. What if it's Watson?
Yeah.
What if he has an electric year and the Browns make the playoffs?
Well, I mean, there's a reason why this team's got, what is their over-under win total is 9.5 in Vegas. I mean, they won 7 games last year. I mean, there's huge expectations that he can be that guy or some fraction of it at least, And
in a tough division, too.
Right, in a very tough division. But even if he's, shades of the old Deshaun Watson, that's a pretty damn good quarterback.
Especially for that team.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why they paid what they paid. Desperation leads to some crazy decisions. And they were historically desperate at that position. They closed their eyes, paid the check, said, screw it, we're taking it. We're going to go with
crazy
it.
Crazy gamble, and I think you hear rumblings that the GM's going to be on the firing line if it doesn't work out, right? Because that's the kind of move that gets you fired if it doesn't work
right.
out.
Even though the owner is the one that clearly had to pass on everything.
For sure.
But he's not taking the fall.
Well, why would he?
Of course not. No one would in that position. It's always someone else's fault.
Right.
Maybe the GM's fault.
Of course.
Yeah, it has to. All right, Andrew Raycroft coming up on the announcement that Patrice Bergeron is retiring. Look back on his career, but also what does this mean for the Bruins? That lineup is starting to turn, man. They were historically great. They lose to Florida. Without Patrice Bergeron, they are a much weaker team.
Good for
the
Leafs.
That is just a straight fact. How do they recover from this? Yeah, we'll get into it with Raycroft. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Some big news, not necessarily unexpected news. Patrice Bergeron retiring today. And I remember after they went off the ice, Game 7 at home, was it Verhaeghe that scored the series winner? I think so.
Yes.
And Florida stormed back down 3-1. And Bergeron did kind of a curtain call, and it looked like he was kind of crying it off the ice,
Mm-hmm.
and he and his teammates were kind of going back and forth. But there seemed to be some sort of belief, and maybe it was just, Boston fans and media trying to will this into existence, that the way they ended the series, he couldn't possibly leave on that.
Right.
Right? Like, he couldn't retire now, but he did, and he's out. And I haven't seen any news on David Krejci, but Bergeron and Krejci have been the 1-2 there for, 15 years. Had a ton of success.
Oh, yeah.
And Bergeron was phenomenal this season.
That's what I mean.
And now he's gone.
Well, that's why you
think. That's a massive hole for the Bruins.
I know he missed 4 of the 7 playoff games with the herniated disc. So back problems, if you talk to guys who've had them, that can be a game changer in terms of your athletic mortality, right?
Right.
And so
he was always probably only coming back for 1 year. Like that last year, he was doing the dance back and forth. Might he retire? Might he not? And now he's out. And what does it mean for the Bruins? That is a big question. I think the other teams in the East, as much as they respect Bergeron, they love that he's gone.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's been owning them for a long, long time. And, there it is up on TSN 2, the 22-man roster, projected 22-man roster. If you got Bergeron out, Krejci out, you got Pavel Zacha as your first-line center, Charlie Coyle in your second line. All of a sudden, you got JVR there, Lucic there. It's a different-looking team.
Yeah.
Still good goalie, still really good defense.
Really good D.
Good coach, great wingers. They're still going to be a good team, but great team, That probably wasn't going to happen anyway.
Wow.
But now this really takes a hit. And to chat about it, we had down there now to Boston, former NHLer, former Leaf, and Nesson analyst. Here's Andrew Raycroft. How did you respond to the news today, Andrew, that Bergeron was retiring?
Well, the timing was surprising. Certainly, we all saw how he left the Garden Ice in Game 7 against Florida, and I just heard you say The Last Dance, and that was the theme of the entire season right from day one. And there was a lot of talk right from day one of how special it was and people playing for Patrice, et cetera. So the outcome isn't quite as surprising as maybe the timing. The longer this went, I guess, everyone in Boston, the fans, the people that followed, wow, maybe he's coming back. And I guess now that it's official and it's final, that was actually false hope that we were all giving each other. But the timing of it, we kind of expected this to happen the start of June, not the end of July.
Is there any word on Krejci yet? And is it the widespread expectation that he's also done?
The wide expectation was he was done more so than Patrice. So yes, I think that's the expectation. Now, David's already left before, so he's already, he could be a guy who says, you know what, I'll come back at Christmas. I don't think for him the decision has to be as final or has to be made over the summer. I think he can let it linger a little bit more than Patrice, just because of the kind of person he is, but also just because he's left for a season already.
So, we posted a board up on TV here about what the projected opening day lineup looks like. And it, up the middle of the ice, that's got to be a concern, right? Like, they had a historically great regular season. We saw what happened in the playoffs. They were always going to take a step back. Like, in the age of parity, the Bruins, you're not going to run off 60-plus wins. That was never going to happen again. But now you take Bergeron out, possibly Krejci out. Like, how big of a step could this be, and how much concern is there in Boston?
I don't think the word concern yet. I think because you guys just said the goaltending, the defense, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, you have those two. David Pastrnak, a 60-goal scorer, Brad Marchand. So there's more than enough pieces, but I think it's more interest, very unsure. And how much has Patrice Bergeron, I can't wait to go see a game and sit there and have one shift where I go, wow, Patrice was so good. The simplicity of his defense and how he made plays without being fancy or flashy with them. So that will be interesting. I think they're not rolling back 63 wins. That was never going to happen. I think the fact that they weren't able to reload with the salary cap hurts them as much as anyone else because they had such a discount from Krejci and Bergeron last season that they don't get a lot. They get essentially no relief from losing those two guys, where most every other team, if they lost their two best players, arguably, they would get a lot of cap relief. The Bruins didn't get that. So I think with the cap not only going up $1 million, that really affected them this summer in filling that hole in those holes. So certainly there's a lot of question mark up the middle. And can those players take an extra step and of course not fill Patrice's skates, but come close enough to win enough games 2-1 this season?
So Andrew, when you think about the decision that Bergeron just made today on the day after his 38th birthday, it's speculation, but what do you think it boils down to? Because on one level, hey, this guy's pretty much close to the height of his powers, even though he's getting up there in age. He's just won his 6th Selke. You look at some of the numbers, they're just incredible for how few goals go in the Bruins net when he's on the ice at 5-on-5 and also even as a penalty killer. And yet, we know he didn't play all the playoff games because of that back problem. Where do you think the ultimate decision lied for him, if you could kind of speculate on his thinking?
And that's the big question. I can't wait to hear tomorrow. I hopefully we get a little color on that. I don't think we're going to get a whole lot, but I would love a little color on the thought process, because you're right. He's playing at a very high level. He doesn't have to go play next season, then go down to the fourth line and be a role player. He would still be a first or second line minute player, 18 a night, and doing that job. If I'm speculating, if I'm looking at it from a player that was nowhere near his level, but as a former NHL player, I'm thinking, all right, I'm just turned 38. I know I will never have a season like I just had, and it was so much fun. We won every single game, but it was still really hard. And I know next season's not going to be anywhere near as easy. It's not going to be as anywhere as the planes aren't going to be as fun because we're not going to roll off 15 wins in a row 4 times in the year. And my body hurts, and it's going to be hard, and I just can't go back to that. It's there. And then, of course, a young family. So my speculation is he was planning last season to be his last year, a terrible way to end it, which makes you want to think, all right, could I roll it back? Could I put this all together and change my mind? And then saying, you know what, I can't do it. And I don't want to do it. And I could probably play a few weeks here and there, but I know what February is going to feel like, and I can't prepare for that.
We're chatting with Andrew Raycroft on the news of Patrice Bergeron retiring today. It's July 25th, so it's still, there's still a lot that can happen. There still can be trades. There can be movement. There likely will be. But if you look at the Atlantic Division in particular, it's been the Bruins, Tampa, the Leafs. For the last 3 or 4 years, they've owned the division. Florida's kind of, come and went. The other teams have kind of been chasing it to an extent. How do you see that division stacking up as of today? If you're looking ahead to next season, give me your top 3 teams.
It's so. I think I'm looking at Toronto. Right, I would pick Toronto first. I would pick Florida second, and I'll go Bruins and Tampa really close 3-4. I'm still not going to go to Ottawa and Buffalo and Detroit. Okay. I know we've been doing the song and dance for 5 years now. Until we really see it, until we see the Ottawa Senators do it over and over consistently against Stamkos, against still David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand and Austin Matthews, and now Tkachuk and Barkov and Flo. I still would lean those 4 teams at the start. I got to imagine one of them jumps into the top 4 and one of those drop out, like we almost saw Florida do this season. But right this second, I'm still hanging in there because of what the Leafs, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Panthers, and the Boston Bruins have built over the last 6-7 years.
So, Andrew, it'd be great to get your take, since not only did you play goal in the NHL, you played goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs. What did you make of the weekend's announcement that the Leafs, are going to be paying Ilya Samsonov $3.55 million on a 1-year arbitrator's decision for this season?
Well, I think the dollar is the dollar. When you go to arbitration, you go right down the middle. And that was going to be the market. You're going to see Jeremy Swayman come out of arbitration next Monday or Tuesday, probably before arbitration, and that market's set. They're going to be right around there. Gustafsson in Minnesota, he's going to be right around that number too. So I would say that Samsonov set the market for those 3 guys, and that's what that number is going to be. I think the fact it's a 1-year deal, it's another show-me deal for him. And now with the Matt Murray stuff up in the air, that gives Samsonov a great opportunity to really turn himself into a Toronto Maple Leaf, perhaps, maybe a long extension with the cap numbers going up. I like it. I like the position where they're in with Joe Wald coming into his own last season. He can fight. And then, and again, we don't know what Matt Murray is going to look like. And I'm not sure what it will be, but I think they're in a good position. So it's a long way to answer that. I like the signing for Samsonov. I don't mind the Leafs goaltending in any way whatsoever. I think they're in a good place.
Yeah, listen, Samsonov, he had a good year. Like he had a good year, and $3.55 million on a 1-year deal. That's not a long-term commitment. It's likely not going to burn you unless he's awful for whatever reason. That kind of number is not going to burn you. And Joseph Woll's on a rookie deal. He's going to make like $800,000. Mm-hmm. So if it's those two, like Murray's not going to be a part of the program. They're either going to buy him out, put him on long-term IR, or trade him and attach assets to him. You got to move on from him. They're way over the cap, and he's just not. It didn't work. It was a mess. But those two goalies, they're young, but they're also cheap, right? And that can benefit you if they play well.
Absolutely, no question. And also, let's not overlook the fact the Leafs should still score 5 goals a game too.
Right.
So that's easy. It's much easier to play goal when you have the forward group that they have, with Bertuzzi coming in as well. So that the pressure of the goaltending position shouldn't come into factor until April or May, as it always does in Toronto. But even that, I liked Samsonov's game in the playoffs last season. So no, I think they're in a really good position in the goal next season.
Always great catching up with you, Andrew, especially midsummer. We appreciate you finding time for us, man. We'll do it again down the road.
Sounds great, guys. My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the week.
You got it. Andrew Raycroft, former Leaf, current NESN analyst. And I'm sure the teams, like he mentioned, and I lean towards where he's at. Like, show me that you can do it, Ottawa. Prove to me you can do it, Buffalo.
Long way to go there.
It is. And I know they knock on the door and all that kind of stuff, but they have not walked through it in a long time. Bergeron, no, leaving. Krejci leaving.
Yeah.
Boston, and he makes a great point that they don't get cap relief from that because the guys weren't making any money.
Right.
So it's not like all of a sudden they got $15 million available and they can go out and spend it. Or they knew about this on June 25th. He announced it July 25th. The draft is come and gone. Free agency is come and gone. I'm sure
they had to have a pretty good idea, though.
I'm sure they had a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Likely he was giving them a pretty good, idea of where it was going to go. And they might have even said to him, listen, if you decide to come back, we got to even pay you less.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make it work, but you're not making
2.5.
We're making you like $1 million, $1.5 million.
Right.
And he might have been up for that anyway. But if you're Ottawa, Detroit, you got to be looking at that Buffalo saying, okay, maybe Boston takes a big step back.
Yeah.
Tampa keeps getting hit, right? They keep losing guys. They lost Killorn. They've lost others.
And maybe people look at Toronto as a little vulnerable now. Losing the D's not what it was.
Yep.
You as much as you've got some goaltending here, and I know Andrew was complimentary of the Toronto goaltending. These guys aren't necessarily proven guys.
No.
Very few are in this league in that position. And look, if I'm looking at those three teams, I think Ottawa and Detroit are in kind of a separate category. Buffalo, to me, when you got two stud Ds like Power and Dahlin, let's face it, he was getting Norris Trophy consideration. And you got some pretty, you got the Tage Thompson of the world up front.
Yep.
Like having that kind of solidity on D for the next however many years they're going to have those guys, as long as they can afford both of them. That's a nice recipe for me, and that makes them look like they could be legit quicker.
I tend to agree with you. I think their goaltending has always been kind of hanging over them. The same thing with Detroit, same thing with Ottawa. But as Raycroft pointed out, if you got a really good team that scores a lot and defends well, then your goaltending, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
Where in Ottawa and Buffalo and Detroit, it's got to be closer to perfect, because they don't have the same amount of game breakers. But as you said, in Buffalo, they're closer. Like Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin were game breakers.
Yeah.
Like those were world-class, like stud players last year. And Owen Power is going to be a part of that program. And Skinner had a bounce-back year. Alex Tuck had a really good year.
Yes. And I just think, like, Hayes, we've kind of seen the lesson here in Toronto, where they've won one playoff series out of 8 tries. Like, if you're thinking about how to start building a team, and look, when you win a draft lottery and the best player available is Austin Matthews, I would never say, go take a D.
Right,
but
you take him.
But if you happen to get, if you'd rather, like, who would you rather start with? Look, the centerman's the centerman, but Toronto got a lot of forward strength all at once, and they never get the stud on D. Morgan Riley's been very good on D, but I don't know if we look back in 10 years, is Morgan Riley going to have this kind of career that Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power have? We don't know, but those guys, to me, have the making of Norris Trophy candidates.
Yeah.
And Morgan Riley's never been that.
No. I mean, that's something that has kind of plagued this team throughout their existence, really. Like, it's amazing that the Leafs have been around for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And, you put the best of the best. They're great players. They're Hall of Famers. But they can't compete with the best of Montreal.
No.
Of Edmonton, of Pittsburgh, of Detroit. You You might argue Chicago has passed them by in terms of best. If you went, Taves, Bobby Hall, Kane,
Makita,
Duncan Keith. Yeah, Makita, exactly. Like, again, like the best defenseman in franchise history, I think most would argue is Boreas Solming.
Yeah.
If not Tim Horton. Riley's been very good. McCabe and Cavalier were very good, but it wasn't the best of the best.
No.
And, that's eluded them
and
for a
it's
long
just,
time.
Yeah, and it's just, you think about, the recipe for Stanley Cup winning teams, right? And you looked at that, Vegas D and just having, big guys, big stud guys. And
Pietrangelo and Theodore are studs.
Yeah.
They're superstar Team Canada studs.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's been teams that have done it without it. I guess the Letang situation in Pittsburgh where they won it without Letang playing and kind of had a collective cast of good defensemen who could skate, right? But that's few and far between. It's hard to build your team on the exception, right?
Right. It actually would be an interesting exercise. Maybe we'll try to do that this week. And it's difficult when you're talking about historical figures,
right?
Because I didn't see Tim Horton play.
No.
I didn't see Boreas Solming in his prime, and I understand they're all-time great players, and everyone loves them in Toronto, and they deserve the adulation and numbers, retired Hall of Fame, all that kind of stuff. But if you're talking, let's say those are considered the two greatest Leaf defensemen ever, and I think most people would suggest that is the case.
Yeah.
A pairing of Solming and Horton. Like, how many teams would you have to get down before you'd say, okay, that's better than their best pairing? Like, if you just simply had a pairing of a guy, like a great player in his prime who played at least one season there. Boston, obviously, you have Orr Bork. You're not passing that.
Pretty tough to pass that.
Yeah. I'm thinking Anaheim, you'd have Pronger and Niedermeyer.
Montreal, where do you even start?
Montreal, you got Larry Robinson and
Larry Savard.
Chris Chelios.
Let me go more recent. Yeah,
Detroit, you could do Chelios and Lindstrom. Edmonton, you could do Coffey and Pronger. Pronger had one great year there where they went to a Cup final.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you could probably go down the list, and I wonder when it would get to a point where you would say the pairing of Solming and Horton, that's where they should be appropriately slotted. I don't know. I mean, we're just doing this on the fly.
It's definitely a long way. Like, they've never had a Norris Trophy winner, so that's you start there, right? Like,
right.
And not only it's just a different philosophy, right? And they fell into all these great forwards, and then in a lot of ways, nobody was sitting here saying they shouldn't get these guys when they had the chance to get these guys, right? Mm-hmm. But they just never been able to. We talked about having been able to develop a goalie since Eddie Belfour left the building, and they didn't develop Eddie Belfour. They just the D. They don't have that stud guy, and you
got to get lucky sometimes.
The fatal, it's obviously lucky.
You got to get lucky. You got to be on the board at the right time, and that's the nature of the beast. Today's best bet's powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I'm on the over Bassett total strikeouts tonight. You got to pay some juice on this, but he's been racking up Ks a lot his last handful of starts. 4.5 is the total. I like the over. Bo Bichette registering a hit. You got to pay money here. You got to pay a lot of juice, but I think Bo's going to get the message from last night. I think he adjusts. I think he gets on base. So I could see him having a big night.
Slump buster.
Yes, I think it's a slump buster in L.A. tonight. And I like the Brewers' money line tonight. You get Corbin Burns on the mound. Like, this guy has been so good.
Oh, yeah.
So good against the Reds. Again, you're paying juice here. If you parlay it, though, you get plus 255. I like it. I like those plus odds on those three bets.